Two petty thugs dared to run to the construction site to cause trouble, but they didn't expect that the seemingly normal foreman was actually a secretly ferocious Jason Statham. The thugs were completely unable to fight back. With just a few moves, Jason disciplined them into obedient submission. Seeing the thugs' accomplices still looking defiant, Jason directly pulled out a large item from behind his back. If they still dared to act up, Jason wouldn't mind making their heads bloom. The thugs, now frightened, left the construction site. Who would have thought Jason wasn't keeping bees anymore, but had switched to being a construction foreman? Yet there are still clueless people who just like to mess with danger. Jason had to single-handedly, with a gun, take down the whole gang. The male protagonist, Levon, is a legend in the world of covert operations, but later, he grew tired of the life of licking blood off the knife's edge. So Levon directly chose to retire, changing his identity to become a construction site foreman and having a very good relationship with the family of his boss, Joe. That day, Joe's daughter, Jenny, had just finished a master's. She wanted to celebrate happily with some university friends. Although Joe was reluctant, he still agreed to pay for it. But right at this moment, Levon accidentally looked outside, spotting a black car from elsewhere entering the construction site. Several men who looked hard to mess with stepped out. Levon realized the situation wasn't good and immediately walked over, conveniently picking up an iron bucket. Two small fries dared to open their mouths and curse. Levon had to show them what a tough man is. Levon quickly snatched a crowbar, then used it to hook the handgun from the small thug's hand, easily controlling both of them. Seeing quite a few more people coming as reinforcements, Levon had to pull out his privately hidden custom handgun. Only then did the others realize they had run into a tough nut, hastily and obediently raising their hands before leaving the construction site. Jenny stood aside, observing the entire process, utterly astonished in her heart, never expecting the normally unassuming Uncle Levon to be such a capable person. After finishing work at the construction site, Levon drove to his father-in-law's house. A weekend party was being held there, but actually, today was the day Levon got to visit his daughter. Levon quickly called his daughter to the car, but immediately, his father-in-law came over, speaking sarcastically and hinting at Levon, saying that when his daughter was alive, he didn't see him coming home so diligently. Clearly, the father-in-law was extremely dissatisfied with his son-in-law. Levon silently accepted all of his father-in-law's reproaches. He had indeed neglected his wife in the past. Afterwards, the father and daughter went to a small diner for a meal. Levon gave the prepared gift to his daughter. Opening it revealed it was a picture of her mother. Because her grandfather had hidden all of her mother's photos, the daughter had even started to forget her mother's face. Fortunately, Levon showed her this picture. Later, Levon went to his lawyers to tell them what happened today. The father-in-law was trying to provoke Levon into getting physical to strip Levon of his custody rights. Currently, the father-in-law's lawyer claims Levon suffers from stress disorder and thus accuses him of having violent tendencies. The father-in-law's side advocates reducing visitation time from 2 hours per week to 1 hour every 2 weeks. Levon felt it was laughable upon hearing this. He had served the country for over 20 years. Now, because of these things, he had become a dangerous element. He'd definitely have a fight to the end. Levon gave a sum of money he had painstakingly saved to the lawyers, asking them to help him win back his rightful rights. The lawyer was curious why the father-in-law held such a deep grudge. Levon told the truth, that his wife had suffered from depression for many years. That day, when Levon was on a mission abroad, his wife unfortunately committed suicide. Levon thus had to endure his father-in-law's blame. After hearing this, the lawyer told Levon to prepare mentally, because the father-in-law had hired a top legal team. Once the case is lost, Levon would have to pay compensation until he had nothing left. Time moved to the evening. Jenny and her classmates went to a nightclub to have a wild time. The young girls unleashed their stress on the dance floor, completely unaware of the approaching danger. On the second floor, someone was secretly taking photos of them dancing. Then, the scoundrels targeted Jenny, the most beautiful one. When Jenny got drunk and went to the bathroom to vomit, the man with ill intentions took the opportunity to knock her unconscious and carry her away. The next day, Levon, now penniless, arrived punctually at the construction site to work and earn money. As a result, he saw several police officers stepping out of the office, questioning the boss and his wife, who looked distressed. Only then did he learn Jenny had been missing since last Friday and still hadn't returned by Monday. But the police just took notes perfunctorily. Joe and his wife were now extremely worried. Joe knew Levon had extraordinary skills, so they wanted to ask Levon for help finding Jenny. Levon initially didn't want to agree, because he was determined to leave that life behind. Therefore, even when Joe offered $5 million, Levon still didn't accept. But actually, in his heart, Levon felt a bit reluctant. After work, he drove to his old friend Gunny's place. Years ago, Gunny and Levon were colleagues, also notorious cold-blooded individuals. But now, Gunny's eyes were nearly blind. After hearing the details about Jenny, Gunny advised Levon absolutely not to let himself have regrets. If he wanted to do it, just do it boldly and definitely give it his all. So the next day, Levon went to Joe's house. At this time, because his beloved daughter's life or death was unknown. Joe had aged several years overnight. Seeing this, Levon also felt deep empathy. Years ago, when his wife passed away, he had left the British Royal Marines in grief. Levon didn't want to see Jenny perish, so he solemnly told Joe that he would definitely rescue Jenny. Immediately after, Levon went to the bar where Jenny disappeared to investigate. Soon, he discovered this bar was not simple at all. The bar owner secretly dealt drugs, with very large transaction volumes. After identifying the target, Levon went to the alley behind the bar, seeing the surveillance camera had been intentionally damaged. Additionally, he picked up the earring Jenny dropped on the ground. Not long after, the bar owner closed up and drove away directly. He completely didn't realize his car had been tagged with a tracking device. Levon, relying on the tracker, smoothly found his way to the other party's house. He easily picked the door lock and stormed into the room with a gun. Levon took the opponent's handgun and demanded to know who kidnapped Jenny. Unexpectedly, he still wanted to play the lying game, fabricating a story about Jenny getting drunk and leaving on her own. The scene changed. The man had been pushed down into the swimming pool by Levon to undergo a waterboarding punishment. The terrifying feeling of suffocation made the man struggle violently, but he remained tight-lipped, refusing to confess, even saying the power behind the kidnappers was not something Levon could touch. But before Levon could ask for a specific name, the man's accomplice arrived at the door. Levon had no choice but to use the man as a human shield in front. Then, in an instant, shot the accomplice dead. He opened the dead body's shirt to look. His heart immediately grew heavy. The tattoo on the chest proved he was Russian. Levon took the ID and the large sum of money from the house, quickly leaving the scene. The next day, Levon lay in ambush at the apartment door, seeing a luxury car appear. Only 3 people got out and entered the room. They were all members of the Russian Brotherhood, a mafia organization. Among them was a high-ranking member of the gang. The few people killed were subordinates of the gang. Looking at the traces at the scene, the 3 seemed to have died together, but the boss, discovered the money he earned from dealing had disappeared. Just then, we noticed the wounds on the bodies were caused by a shotgun, but there was no shotgun in the room. Clearly, it was done by an outsider. But who dared to break into a house to rob and kill on the Brotherhood's territory? Soon after, the gang's cleaner, who specialized in handling dead bodies, came to the apartment to clean up thoroughly. Will led his men. Preparing to leave, Levon immediately drove, tailing them, going straight to the front of a suburban villa. This was his hiding place. Levon quietly sneaked into the dense forest, installing monitoring devices for all actions of the people inside the house. He discovered while hitting a woman after a fierce argument. The woman angrily drove away. At this time, only what was left alone in the house. Levon intentionally wore a hat when entering the villa to avoid the camera recording his face. Then a pot of hot coffee was poured straight onto his face, causing him to pass out in pain. By the time he woke up again, he was tied to a chair and placed right at the edge of the pool, his life hanging by a thread. We immediately reacted. The person in front of him was the one who broke into the house to kill and rob. He immediately said he was high-ranking in the Brotherhood, and Levon doing this would result in the Brotherhood hunting him down for 3 generations. Unexpectedly, Levon slapped him hard across the face, saying it was for the woman from the morning. Wu was instantly stunned. What did him hitting his wife have to do with an outsider? Only to see Levon, after hearing this, deliver another slap. Then he threw all the money we cherished onto his face, and took out Jenny's photo for him to identify. Only then did we understand, Levon had killed 3 of his subordinates just for one woman. We still thought Levon wouldn't dare kill him, so he firmly refused to cooperate. But he never, ever expected Levon to kick him into the pool with 1 foot. His lifelong formidable reputation was thus shattered. Afterwards, Levon obtained a phone recording. The content accused Day of bringing trouble to his house. Levon immediately followed this clue to investigate further. The cleaner came again to clean up his body. The death of a high-ranking member also brought the big boss, Simon, out into the open. He came to the house to check the surveillance cameras, discovering the perpetrator didn't care about money. So what exactly was the motive? He ordered his men to quickly find this person. At the same time, Jenny, who had been missing for several days, was currently imprisoned in a cell. When someone came in to deliver food, Jenny hurriedly explained her parents had always been gentle, never causing conflict with anyone. They must have kidnapped the wrong person. Unexpectedly, some remark angered the food deliverer, so she immediately put a knife to Jenny's neck. Jenny here now was no longer the pampered princess. To survive, she had to obediently listen. The first command the woman gave was to tell Jenny to obediently eat her food. Early the next morning, Levon made a phone call, contacting his old friend for help investigating a gangster named Day. The opponent might very likely be involved in human trafficking and selling flour. He understood the severity of the situation, immediately telling Levon that Day has a bar in Joliet where he sells high-purity stone flour to the Russians. It's very likely he's there. Then Levon, without stopping, drove to the bar, went straight to the counter, and sat down. During this time, he intentionally glanced around. As expected, the girl Artemis, closely monitoring the surveillance cameras, immediately spotted Levon's suspicious behavior. carrying a gun in his pocket. She even suspected Levon was a cop coming to investigate, so she told her henchman, Viper, to go out and confirm. Viper directly sat down next to Levon. Seeing this, Levon pulled out a wad of cash from his pocket, indicating he was here for business. Viper then led him inside to meet the bar manager there, Dutch. Dutch asked with a smile why Levon brought a gun to find him. Levon casually replied, I'm just protecting myself against unforeseen circumstances. After all, this line of work is full of risks. But Artemis told Dutch that Levon's aura looked very much like a cop's. Hearing this, Dutch immediately became vigilant, demanding Levon hand over the gun in his pocket. Levon naturally refused, so the henchmen in the house immediately surrounded him. Levon's face didn't change. He swung his fists, big as sandbags, hitting the opponent's heart. Levon's skills were agile, and his blows vicious, but the more fiercely he fought, the more Dutch seemed interested. Seeing Levon smash a bottle, intending to strike ruthlessly, Dutch hurriedly spoke up to stop him. He stood up and shook Levon's hand, feeling the countless calluses. Clearly, these were the hands of a manual laborer. Only then did Dutch believe Levon wasn't a cop. Levon also explained he used to be a soldier, which is why his skills were like that. Levon frankly said he wanted to open a new route, needing 4 pounds of good quality flour each month. Furthermore, his supplier in Chicago had disappeared. Plus Dutch's goods had a great reputation, which is why he came looking. Dutch frowned slightly after hearing this, pondered for a moment, then readily agreed, at a price of $1 million per pound. He told Levon to come to the designated pancake house at 7 o'clock tomorrow for the first transaction. The next day, Levon arrived punctually at the pancake house, while Viper and Artemis were already waiting there. But after receiving the money, they didn't give the goods to Levon, they threw Levon a phone. Soon, Dutch called Levon via this phone. The goods, it turned out, had been placed under the steering wheel long ago. After Levon hung up the phone, he threw the expensive goods he just bought into the water. In the evening, Artemis delivered the girl to the buyer. As a result, when checking the goods, an unexpected incident occurred. The girl who was supposed to be unconscious bit the man. He immediately became angry and told Emmys to take the person away. On the other side, Levon received a call from Dutch, saying an important figure wanted to meet him tomorrow. Dutch reminded him to bring money and dress smartly. The next day, Levon, wearing an elegant suit, arrived at the appointed location. The person who came was named Day, the real boss behind Dutch, and also the son of the man who died in the pool. But he didn't follow his father into the Brotherhood. Instead, he started his own business dealing in flowers and human trafficking. Day was very cautious, first demanding Levon provide a business card for checking. Only after confirming there were no issues did he continue the discussion. Then the two sides exchanged money for goods, initially reaching an intention for long-term cooperation. But after Levon returned home, he resolutely destroyed the expensive goods he had just bought. Then he continued searching for clues. In several photos taken before Jenny's disappearance, the figure of the henchman Viper was present. Levon dug out the phone obtained from the bar owner's accomplices that night. Sure enough, he found information related to Jenny, so Levon immediately returned to that bar that night, lying in ambush at the door, continuing to search for clues. But unexpectedly, he was discovered first by Emmys. Sensing danger, Levon quickly hijacked a motorcycle and rapidly fled the scene. The pursuers hurriedly got in cars, closely following Levon, bullets raining down toward him. Levon skillfully weaved through the narrow alley without getting hit by a single bullet, making those behind furious. They hurriedly split up, wanting to block the motorcycle's path. Levon, with a skillful tail whip, easily escaped the encirclement, but never expected to crash straight into a police car up ahead. Levon was finally forced to stop, but what was worse was that Day had bribed the local police. The black female police officer even rewarded Levon with a gunbutt strike, then handed him over to the pursuing henchmen. These two were Simon's sons. They dragged Levon into the car, demanding why he was looking for Dutch. Levon mocked the two, saying they were dressed like circus performers, making both angrily retort loudly that their clothes were high-end custom tailoring. Unexpectedly, they fell for Levon's divisive tactic. He took advantage of the two being distracted, suddenly rising up to resist, then quickly snatching a handgun. The other two desperately tried to stop him. The driver, seeing this, stomped hard on the gas pedal, unexpectedly making it easier for Levon to act. The car lost control and crashed into an obstacle. The car immediately flipped over on the riverbank. Levon, the first to stabilize, quickly picked up the handgun. Without hesitation, he shot the other two dead. Immediately after, he kicked the out-of-control car hard into the water. But unfortunately, Simon still found the bodies. The death of his sons made him even more enraged. At the same time, Artemis and Viper trembled as they came to the bar and sat down next to Day, because last time, when delivering Jenny, an incident occurred, causing the esteemed client to have nearly half his face bitten off. Day had to compensate $1 million for this matter. This made him extremely angry, almost cutting off one of Viper's fingers. Fortunately, Day finally calmed down. No, the client demanded Jenny must be killed for the matter to be considered over. On the other side, Simon summoned the high-ranking members of the Brotherhood for a talk. He recounted the series of recent deaths within the Brotherhood truthfully to the others. But Dutch, who knew the whereabouts of that person, had now disappeared somewhere. Simon hoped everyone could quickly find Levon. Then Simon stormed into Day's territory. Henchmen rushed forward, emptying a magazine. Customers in the bar immediately fled in panic. The gang boss's method of purging was truly ruthless. Day's face turned pale, but he dared not resist. Simon told this unfilial son that his father had been drowned in a swimming pool, and his own 2 sons were also killed. Simon instantly understood Day truly didn't know about this. A henchman timely brought up Levon's photo. Day turned pale with fear, hurriedly explaining he really didn't know that person was the killer. They only met once during the transaction and had no contact afterwards. But Day had a photo of Levon's fake ID. Only then did Simon lead his men away from the bar. Then, based on the photo, he quickly found out Levon's true identity, as well as detailed information about his father-in-law and daughter. The father-in-law was completely unaware of what was happening, practicing yoga following the TV, when suddenly, 2 uninvited guests burst into the house. At the same time, Levon received a phone call. A teacher at the school said the child's grandfather hadn't come to pick her up from school yet. Levon quickly drove to the school to pick up his daughter. The girl even curiously asked what happened to Grandpa. She sent over 30 messages and he still didn't reply. Could it be that Dad killed Grandpa? Levon almost burst out laughing upon hearing this. But he also told his daughter the truth, that Dad used to do some dangerous things. Now someone is hunting Dad. So Dad doesn't want family members to be harmed because of this. Seeing the father-in-law's tracker still showing him at home, Levon turned the car around and sped toward it. The result was shocking. He found the father-in-law's house on fire. He told his daughter to stay put, then single-handedly rushed into the sea of flames to rescue the talkative father-in-law, who was still barely breathing. After the father-in-law regained consciousness, his attitude toward Levon finally softened a bit. Then he was put into an ambulance. Levon drove his daughter to Gunny's house in a remote place. Gunny understood clearly, his brother must have encountered huge trouble. Otherwise, with Levon's abilities, he fundamentally wouldn't have needed to flee so miserably. But even now, Levon still hadn't given up the idea of finding Jenny. He thought if he could find Viper, perhaps he could find Jenny's whereabouts. Gunny, after hearing this, didn't pour cold water on his old friend, but led Levon to see some cool stuff. Only to see the small room filled with all sorts of weapons. These were all items Gunny had collected over the years. Levon picked up an M14 rifle with no serial number. This type of gun had great power, long range, truly a sharp blade handed to a war god. In the evening, Levon finished packing his things and promised his daughter he would definitely return safely. At the same time, Artemis and Viper were preparing to find a place to dispose of Jenny. Unexpectedly, Jenny's grandfather was an Air Force officer. The girl had been taught by her grandfather since childhood, possessing certain self-defense capabilities. Jenny found an opportunity to launch a surprise attack, causing the car to lose control and crash into a tree trunk. Jenny quickly got out of the car first, then ran desperately into the dense forest, again finding a place to rub and break the rope binding her hands. Soon, Artemis and Viper completely lost track of Jenny. If they failed the mission, both of them were done for. As for Jenny, relying on intuition, she continued to flee, finally seeing a police car, symbolizing hope. But Jenny, at this time, completely didn't expect that the police could actually collude with bad guys. Before long, the police car drove her again to a remote house. By the time Jenny realized something was wrong, she had missed the best chance to escape, but events took an unexpected turn. The client who was bitten video called Emmys. He was addicted to that feeling again, telling the two to quickly bring that dirty Jenny over. At the same time, Levon single-handedly stormed into Day's bar. The guards hadn't even reacted before being dealt with by Levon's chaotic knife work. Then he used a dead body as bait to assassinate the next guard. Soon, the bar was littered with corpses. Day was just about to take a hostage when, in the next second, he was accurately shot through the palm by Levon. Levon took out Jenny's photo, demanding her whereabouts. Day hesitated for a moment, then said he would take him to find the person. In the car, Levon took out Viper's photo again, only then learning Viper was responsible for selecting the girls, then kidnapping the chosen ones. Day even dared to mock that Viper was their bar's HR manager, making Levon angrily punch him hard in the face. Then, following Day's directions, the two arrived at an extremely secret building, even having armed guards watching the door. Levon once again confirmed with Day that Jenny was in this building. Without saying another word, he kicked him straight into the water, then fired 2 shots to send him off to meet his father. Levon took out his gear and dressed properly. He took a deep breath, then quietly advanced toward the building. Using night vision goggles, he saw the enemy in the tree. Levon memorized the position, then drew his pistol and shot the opponent dead. On the other side, Dutch suddenly received news that Levon had created a bloodbath at Day's bar and was currently heading toward Day's hideout. He quickly summoned his brothers, brought weapons, and rushed over to serve up their heads to Levon. At this time, Levon had successfully approached the outside of the building. An unlucky guy who just ran outside for some fresh air unexpectedly got dealt with by Levon's knife in the next second. As for Jenny, she was hung up inside the house by Viper and Artemis. Artemis then invited the client over from the gambling table. It turned out he wanted to torture Jenny cruelly to avenge being bitten in the face. In an instant, screams echoed throughout the room. Levon, holding the M14, burst in. Although the henchmen also held weapons, they were fundamentally no match for Levon. Right at this moment, Dutch arrived on the scene, leading the reinforcements. Unfortunately, despite appearing very imposing, the difference in strength was ultimately too great. Levon didn't even bother lifting his eyelids. The muzzle turned a few times, causing several people to immediately fall into eternal sleep. Dutch, seeing his subordinates were useless, had to charge forward himself. The two began close combat, wielding daggers, but Dutch couldn't even withstand 2 moves before Levon's sharp knife stabbed straight into his neck. Levon changed to a spare magazine. The next second, he heard Jenny's cry for help. That client hadn't even managed to say a word before being shot dead on the spot by Levon. As for Viper, after emptying his bullets, he was pinned down and brutally beaten by Levon. With a sharp elbow strike, Viper's neck immediately snapped. Jenny also took the opportunity to use her legs to choke Artemis until the opponent completely stopped struggling. Levon used 2 hammer blows to shatter Jenny's chains. As a result, yet another third wave of people rushed in from outside, being 2 of Simon's subordinates. 2 police officers, who had just received the report, arrived, only to be turned into sieves by a crazy barrage of bullets from the blonde guy. Then, these 2 and Levon engaged in a fierce gunfight. Levon used the device on his chest to clearly see the positions of the 2. He raised his gun high and shot the blonde guy dead. The bald guy saw this and quickly ducked down to hide. Levon casually threw a grenade, which landed accurately near the bald guy. At this point, the last enemy was finally eliminated. Levon quickly led Jenny away. Outside, Simon was left all alone. Plus, the remaining members of the Brotherhood had decided not to continue pursuing Levon. Otherwise, it would only increase casualties needlessly. Faced with this scene, Simon could only roar helplessly. Afterwards, Levon returned Jenny to her parents' side. He also successfully reunited with his daughter.